5 obvious signs of social anxiety that are mistaken for shyness. Do you get butterflies in your stomach just thinking about social interactions? Have you found yourself avoiding gatherings or feeling your heart race when speaking in public? It's common, but how normal is it? It might be more than just shyness. Often we mistake social anxiety for mere shyness, but there are clear signs that help us differentiate one from the other. The 5th sign is where everything becomes most obvious, but we need to understand each one. And grasping these differences can be the first step towards seeking the necessary support and significantly improving the quality of life. This is Dichter anxiety, and we're just getting started. First sign: intense fear of being judged. Unlike shyness, where there's a certain reservation in social interactions, social anxiety carries the weight of an intense fear of being judged by others. This fear isn't limited to new situations or unknown people. It persists even among friends and in familiar environments. If you find yourself avoiding public speaking, starting conversations, or expressing your opinions for fear of severe judgment from others, this might be a sign of social anxiety. You know, there's something that really gets to me, that makes me break out in a cold sweat, even before I open my mouth in a group of friends, or even when thinking about sharing my opinion in a work meeting. It's the fear of being judged. I'm not talking about passing shyness or the nervousness that comes when we're about to speak in public. I'm talking about something that feels like it's going to swallow me whole, you know? For instance, the other day, I had a presentation at work. I knew the subject inside and out, but the idea of standing there in front with all those eyes on me made me think of all the ways things could go wrong. What if I stutter? What if someone disagrees and I don't know how to respond? It's as if every look is a critique, even if no one has said anything yet. And it's not just in situations like that, big ones, so to speak. Even choosing what to post on social media becomes a dilemma. Will they find this interesting? What if they think I'm being ridiculous? Each like or the lack thereof feels like a verdict on who I am. This fear of being judged, of being evaluated and not being good enough is paralyzing. It makes me prefer to stay silent, even when I have something to say. It leads me to avoid certain situations, even those that deep down I want to participate in. But what if I told you that avoiding these situations might be a sign of something deeper than just shyness? That's what we'll discuss in the next topic: the consistent avoidance of social situations. Let's discover together how this avoidance can be more than just a preference for keeping to ourselves. Second sign: consistent avoidance of social situations. A strong indicator of social anxiety is when we begin to systematically avoid situations that involve interacting with other people. This can range from not attending social events, declining invitations to meet up with friends, to avoiding speaking on the phone or participating in video conference meetings. This avoidance is an attempt to control anxiety, but in the long term, it can severely limit our social and professional lives. When I think about the number of times I've made up excuses not to go to social events, the list is long. I'm tired. I have a lot of work to catch up on, or the classic "I'm not feeling very well." The truth is, more than tiredness or actual work, what often stops me from going out is fear. Not the fear of not having anything to wear or not being interesting enough, but a deep, almost visceral fear of exposing myself to situations where I feel I don't have control. Let me tell you about a birthday party I was invited to a few months ago. It was for a close friend, so I really wanted to go. But as the date approached, the anxiety began to increase. What if I didn't know anyone other than the birthday person? What if I had to talk about myself? In the end, I ended up saying that I had another commitment. Interestingly, after giving up on going, I felt a relief mixed with sadness. Relief for having escaped a potentially anxious situation, but sadness for feeling incapable of being part of that moment. This pattern of avoiding social situations repeats itself, and each time it happens, I feel more distant from others and more enclosed in my own bubble. Now, it might be easy to think that this is just a matter of being introverted or shy. And yes, introversion is part of who I am, but the constant avoidance of social situations goes beyond. It's rooted in such a great fear that I prefer to miss opportunities to create memories with friends and family, rather than face the possibility of anxiety and judgment. And speaking of anxiety, it's interesting how this avoidance is not just about the social moment itself, but begins long before the event happens. The excessive worry anticipating these situations is a chapter on its own in this story, and that's exactly what we'll talk about next. How this worry not only takes over the days leading up to the event, but can also deeply affect how we prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally for any social interaction. Third sign: excessive worry before events. If days or weeks before a social engagement you find yourself consumed by excessive worry, imagining all possible scenarios where something can go wrong, this might be a sign of social anxiety. Unlike shyness, where nervousness arises at the moment of interaction, in social anxiety, the anticipatory worry is so intense that it can even lead to physical symptoms like stomach pains, insomnia, and muscle tension. Have you ever felt like your mind is a time machine, constantly taking you to the future, but only to show you scenarios where everything goes wrong? Well, that's me before any social event. The anxiety doesn't start the moment I arrive at the event. It starts days, sometimes weeks before. It's a kind of mental script that insists on reviewing everything that might not go as planned. Take, for example, a dinner with work colleagues. For many, it's just a dinner. For me, it's a minefield of what-ifs. What if I have nothing interesting to say? What if I say something wrong and become a joke? What if I just don't fit in? These questions aren't mere annoyances, they consume me, stealing my peace of mind and even my sleep. What makes this particularly difficult is that I know, rationally, that many of these worries are unfounded. Most people will probably not even remember what I said or did, but this knowledge rarely brings comfort. Anxiety has a way of overshadowing logic, leaving me in a constant state of alert. And it's not just the mind that reacts. The body also kicks in. Muscle tension, restlessness, palpitations. It's as if my entire being is preparing for a battle. And in a way, it is. Except the battle is with myself, with my own fears and insecurities. This cycle of pre-event worry and anxiety is a clear indicator that we're not just dealing with simple shyness or fleeting nervousness. We're talking about social anxiety that deeply affects our ability to live in the present and rejoice in the prospect of future social interactions. But the impact of social anxiety isn't limited to the anticipation of social events. It also manifests physically, in ways that can be both debilitating and visible to others, which only increases the fear of being judged. We'll talk next about these physical symptoms and how they affect our social experience. Fourth sign: physical symptoms in social situations. When I talk about social anxiety, I'm not just referring to an internal battle of thoughts and worries. This battle manifests physically, in ways that can be impossible to ignore. It's as if my body had its own voice, and sometimes it speaks so loudly that I can't hear anything else. When social anxiety manifests, it doesn't just affect our emotional state, but can also provoke significant physical symptoms. During or before social situations, people with social anxiety might experience excessive sweating, trembling, palpitations, shortness of breath, or even nausea. These symptoms are not only uncomfortable, but also increase the fear that others will notice your anxiety, creating a vicious cycle. Let me give you an example. I was at a small family gathering, something that should be relaxing, right? But as I was getting ready to leave the house, I started to feel the first waves of nervousness. It didn't take long for these waves to turn into slight tremors, my hands sweating coldly, as if they were trying to rid themselves of an invisible danger. And my heart, beating so loudly I was convinced everyone could hear it as soon as I entered the room. But it doesn't stop there. In some situations, I feel such acute shortness of breath that I need to make a conscious effort to breathe calmly and not panic. And of course, there's the feeling of nausea that chooses the exact moment to say, "Hi, remember me?" Usually when I'm trying to convince myself to walk into the event venue. These symptoms are not just uncomfortable, they fuel the cycle of anxiety. There's the constant fear that these signs will be visible to others, which ironically only increases the intensity of these physical manifestations. It's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm so afraid of showing signs of anxiety that I end up becoming even more anxious. The most frustrating part is that this makes me avoid social situations even more. After all, who wants to feel this way? Who wants to walk into a room knowing that this internal storm could start at any moment? And here's the big irony. By trying to avoid anxiety, I end up isolating myself even more, which, in the end, only makes the situation worse. In the next topic, we'll explore another challenging aspect of social anxiety: the difficulty in making new friendships. We'll understand how this fear of judgment, these physical symptoms, and the constant avoidance of social situations affect us not just in the moment, but also in our ability to form new bonds. Fifth sign: significant impact on daily life. Finally, one of the clearest signs that someone might be dealing with social anxiety, and not just shyness, is the significant impact it has on their daily life. Whether it affects the ability to work, study, or maintain relationships, social anxiety can seriously restrict a person's ability to live fully. Unlike shyness, which is a personality trait, social anxiety is a condition that can and should be treated. Social anxiety goes far beyond simply feeling nervous before a party or worried after a conversation. It has the power to infiltrate all areas of life, creating barriers that seem insurmountable and impacting fundamental decisions, from career choices to personal relationships. For example, in terms of career, social anxiety has led me to avoid opportunities for advancement simply because they would require more social interactions or public presentations. This means not only missing out on chances for professional growth, but also feeling stagnant, watching colleagues advance while I stay behind, trapped by my own fear. In personal relationships, the impact is equally profound. I've given up participating in hobbies and group activities that interested me, fearing the social exposure they required. This left me with a reduced social circle and a persistent sense of isolation. And even in the friendships I managed to maintain, social anxiety makes me constantly question my worth and belonging, making it difficult to experience genuine connection. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of social anxiety is how it affects self-image and self-esteem. The constant doubt, fear of judgment, and excessive analysis after interactions make me feel as if I'm always failing some invisible test of sociability. This can lead to a vicious cycle of negativity, where each social experience is seen through a lens of potential failure, reinforcing the belief that I am inadequate or inferior. Despite these challenges, it's important to remember that social anxiety does not define who we are. It is a part of our experiences, yes, but it is not our entire story. Recognizing the signs and seeking help can be a crucial first step to learning to manage anxiety and begin to change the narrative of our life. Therapies, coping strategies, and in some cases medication, can offer ways to reduce the impact of social anxiety. By sharing these experiences, my hope is that if you recognize yourself in any of these signs, know that you are not alone. And more importantly, that there is a path through social anxiety, a path that can lead to a fuller life, less limited by fear. Seeking support, whether through friends, family, and especially professionals, is an act of courage, a sign of the strength that you possess. Knowing yourself and recognizing when we need help is the first step towards improving our quality of life.